Chosen ones, this warning is clear. There's a man around you that God is concerned about. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time where noise is celebrated, speed is rewarded, and surface level connections are mistaken for destiny. Yet, in the midst of all this movement, there remains a quiet truth that only those who are spiritually attentive can hear. Not every presence in your life is there to propel you forward. Some are there to test your discernment, some are there to measure your readiness, and some are there because your future has begun to shift, drawing attention in both seen and unseen realms. Ladies and gentlemen, today's message is not designed to stir fear, suspicion, or emotional reaction. It is designed to awaken awareness. When God speaks warnings, he does not do so to unsettle the heart, but to steady it. Divine warnings are acts of love. They arrive not with panic, but with clarity. They come not to confuse, but to protect what is precious, what is chosen, and what is ordained. Many people believe danger always announces itself loudly. They expect opposition to look hostile, obvious, or aggressive. But spiritual truth reveals something deeper. The most impactful influences are often subtle. They move quietly through familiarity, comfort, and repeated access. They do not rush in to destroy, they linger long enough to influence. And that is why discernment, not assumption, is one of the greatest gifts God gives to those who carry purpose. This message is for the chosen ones, those who sense that their lives are not accidental, that their paths are being shaped by something greater than coincidence. If you have ever felt a stirring within you that your life holds assignment, responsibility, and meaning beyond the ordinary, then this moment is not random. Chosen ones are often surrounded by people who admire their light, are curious about their calling, or are drawn to their depth. Yet not everyone who draws near is aligned with what God is building. Ladies and gentlemen, God is not concerned with appearances. He is concerned with influence. He does not look merely at words spoken, but at the impact left behind. He observes how interactions affect your clarity, your peace, your confidence, and your obedience. And when he highlights a relationship, it is not to accuse, but to alert. This introduction is not an invitation to isolate yourself or mistrust everyone around you. It is an invitation to mature spiritually, to move from emotional decision making to spiritual perception, to understand that as you grow, your boundaries must grow with you, not walls, but filters, not suspicion, but wisdom. As we proceed, I ask you to listen not just with your ears, but with your inner awareness. Let this message settle where truth always speaks, quietly, firmly, and without force. What is meant for you will resonate, what is not will simply pass by. Ladies and gentlemen, when God issues a warning, it is never late. It is always timely. And today, that timing may be speaking directly to you. Discernment is not suspicion, and wisdom is not fear. This distinction matters deeply, especially for chosen ones, because many people misunderstand what it means to be careful. Discernment does not look for danger everywhere, it recognizes truth when it appears. Suspicion is anxious, restless, and reactive. Discernment is calm, observant, and grounded. One comes from insecurity, the other from alignment with God. Chosen ones are not called to live guarded by paranoia, constantly questioning every motive or interaction. That mindset does not come from God. God is not the author of confusion or anxiety. When he gives discernment, it does not agitate the spirit, it settles it. It brings a quiet knowing, a steady awareness that does not need to announce itself loudly. Discernment is a divine gift because it operates beyond logic. Logic asks, does this make sense? Discernment asks, does this align? Many things can make sense and still be wrong for you. Many people can appear harmless and still be misaligned with your assignment. Discernment sees what the eyes cannot, and it hears what words are trying to cover. Suspicion looks for proof before it trusts. Discernment does not need proof, it recognizes patterns. It notices what repeats, what subtly drains, what consistently distracts, and what quietly resists growth. Suspicion is fueled by fear of being hurt again. Discernment is fueled by clarity about where you are going. Chosen ones must understand this, because fear-based suspicion will exhaust you. You will start questioning yourself, doubting your instincts and shrinking your openness out of self protection. Discernment, on the other hand, allows you to stay open while staying aligned. It lets you love without losing clarity. It lets you engage without surrendering authority over your inner world. God does not give discernment to isolate you from people. He gives it to position you correctly among them. Isolation comes from fear. Discernment comes from identity. When you know who you are, you don't need to cut everyone off. You simply stop giving access where alignment is absent. One of the clearest signs of divine discernment is peace. Even when it reveals uncomfortable truth, it does not bring panic. There is no rush, no pressure, no emotional spike, just an inner signal that says, pay attention here. That signal is not meant to accuse the other person, it is meant to protect your path. Chosen ones often ignore discernment because it doesn't always come with dramatic evidence. It often whispers while emotions shout. Feelings may say, but they mean, well. Discernment says, but they are not aligned. Feelings may say, give them more time. Discernment says, time will not change assignment. And when these two conflict, many chosen ones override discernment in the name of being kind. But kindness without wisdom becomes self betrayal. God is not impressed by how much you tolerate. He is concerned with how well you steward what He has placed inside you. Discernment is stewardship. It is the ability to recognize what belongs in your life at this stage and what does not. Something can be good and still not be God for you. Suspicion reacts to people. Discernment responds to impact. It watches what happens after conversations, not how charming the conversation was. It notices whether clarity increases or confusion grows, whether motivation rises or focus fades, whether faith strengthens or doubt quietly creeps in. This is why discernment requires stillness. A noisy inner world cannot hear it. If you are constantly justifying, explaining, or defending why someone should stay in your life, that is not discernment. That is emotional attachment negotiating with truth. God's discernment never begs, it never argues. It simply reveals. Chosen ones must also understand that discernment sharpens as obedience increases. The more you honor what you sense, the clearer it becomes. When you ignore it repeatedly, it does not disappear, it becomes quieter. Not because God stopped speaking, but because you have trained yourself to override Him. And here is a hard truth. Many chosen ones confuse loyalty with alignment. They stay connected out of history, familiarity, or emotional comfort. Discernment does not erase loyalty, it refines it. It asks, is this connection helping me become who God is calling me to be now? Not who you were now. Discernment does not label people as enemies, it simply recognizes roles. Some people are mirrors, some are lessons, some are supporters, some are observers, and some are distractions, not maliciously, but functionally. Their presence slows momentum, dilutes focus, and diverts energy. God is deeply concerned with influence because influence shapes direction. The people closest to you help determine how clearly you hear Him. That is why discernment is not optional for the chosen, it is essential. Suspicion will make you defensive, discernment will make you precise. When discernment activates, you stop oversharing, you stop explaining your vision to people who cannot carry it, you stop seeking validation where God has already confirmed you. This is not pride, this is maturity. Chosen ones are often misunderstood at this stage because they change without announcement. Their energy shifts, their availability adjusts, their conversations deepen or narrow, and people sense it. Some respect it, some resist it. Discernment prepares you for both without bitterness. Another sign of divine discernment is restraint. You don't feel the urge to confront everything you notice. You understand that not every revelation requires a reaction. Sometimes discernment is simply information for navigation, not ammunition for confrontation. God may show you something about someone, not so you can expose them, but so you can adjust your distance. Exposure is loud, adjustment is wise. Discernment also protects you from self deception. It doesn't just look outward, it looks inward. It seeks your motives, your attachments, your fears. It asks whether you are holding on because it is God's will or because it feels familiar. And this is where discernment becomes a mirror. It reveals not only who others are, but who you are becoming. The more you grow, the more sensitive you become to misalignment. What once felt normal begins to feel heavy. What once felt exciting begins to feel draining. This is not confusion, it is elevation. God sharpens discernment as He prepares you for greater responsibility. Higher levels require cleaner alignment. You cannot carry expanded vision with cluttered connections. Discernment helps you travel light without becoming cold. Chosen ones, discernment is not about assuming the worst in people. It is about assuming responsibility for your assignment. It is not about mistrusting others, it is about trusting God within you. When discernment speaks, it does not shout, it does not accuse, it does not threaten. It simply says, "This matters." And when you learn to listen, you will realize something powerful. You were never meant to figure everything out. You were meant to stay aligned. God handles the rest. Not every connection in your life is a covenant, and this truth becomes clearer as your calling matures. A covenant is not formed by proximity, time, or emotional intensity. A covenant is formed by alignment with purpose. Many chosen ones struggle at this point because they assume that longevity equals destiny. But history does not always indicate assignment, and familiarity does not automatically mean God ordained. A covenant connection strengthens your obedience to God even when it challenges you. It sharpens your clarity. It supports your growth. A distraction, however, feels supportive at first, but slowly redirects your focus. It does not attack your faith openly, it competes with it subtly. It does not demand that you abandon your purpose, it encourages you to postpone it. Chosen ones must learn this distinction because distraction is far more dangerous than opposition. Opposition pushes you to pray, to stand firm, to seek God more deeply. Distraction lulls you into comfort. It whispers, "There's no urgency." It says, "You can do that later." It convinces you that everything is fine, while momentum quietly fades. God assigns covenant relationships strategically. They arrive with timing, confirmation, and alignment. There is peace even when there is correction, growth even when there is discomfort. Covenant does not mean ease, it means purpose, and purpose always produces fruit. Distractions, on the other hand, drain without producing. You give time, energy, emotion, and explanation, but there is little forward movement. You feel busy, yet unfulfilled, connected, yet slightly off center. And because the distraction is not overtly harmful, it is easy to justify its presence. This is where many chosen ones become conflicted. They don't want to label someone negatively. They don't want to feel ungrateful or unkind. But God is not asking you to label people. He is asking you to label seasons. What was once permitted may no longer be productive. What once served you may now slow you. Covenant relationships are marked by mutual recognition. There is a sense of we are moving in the same direction, even if the roles are different. Distractions may admire your direction but do not share it. They benefit from your energy without contributing to your alignment. One clear sign of a distraction is emotional pull without spiritual progress. You feel drawn yet stagnant. You feel attached yet unsettled. There is conversation but little confirmation, presence but no peace. God is concerned about distractions because they quietly reshape priorities. They don't tell you to stop praying, they just take up the time you used to pray. They don't tell you to abandon discipline, they just make it inconvenient. Over time, what once was central becomes optional. Chosen ones must understand the enemy of your future does not always fight you, sometimes it befriends you. Covenant connections respect your boundaries, even when they don't understand them. Distractions push against boundaries, often under the disguise of closeness. They require constant access, frequent reassurance, and emotional availability that begins to compete with your inner stillness. Another indicator of covenant is accountability without control. Covenant relationships speak truth without dominance. They don't manipulate, guilt, or pressure you to stay the same. Distractions, however, often resist your growth because it threatens their comfort. God is deeply intentional about who walks closely with you because proximity creates influence. Influence shapes decisions. Decisions shape destiny. That is why He will highlight certain connections, not to shame you, but to protect the trajectory of your life. Chosen ones often feel guilty for outgrowing connections, but growth is not betrayal. Obedience is not rejection. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to move forward. You are allowed to choose alignment over attachment. Covenant does not compete for attention. It complements your calling. It doesn't demand that you choose between God and people. It encourages deeper obedience to God. Distractions subtly create internal conflict, making you feel torn between pleasing God and maintaining the relationship. When a connection requires you to silence your convictions to keep the peace, it is not covenant. Another sign of distraction is inconsistency. Words and actions don't align. Support is conditional. Encouragement fluctuates based on convenience. Covenant, by contrast, is steady, not perfect, but reliable. God is not against relationships, He created them, but He is against anything that replaces Him as your primary reference point. Covenant connections point you back to God. Distractions slowly pull your attention away from Him. Chosen ones must also recognize that some people are assigned to observe, not to participate. Not everyone who sees your journey is meant to walk it with you. Observation is not partnership. Presence is not permission. Distractions often linger at the edge of your purpose, close enough to influence, but not close enough to commit. They enjoy access without responsibility. God is concerned because distraction feels harmless until you measure time. Weeks turn into months, months into years, and suddenly you realize you've been circling the same level, wondering why progress feels slow. This is not condemnation, it is correction. Covenant accelerates, distraction delays. One multiplies focus, the other fragments it. Chosen ones are often tempted to stay in distracting connections because they feel familiar, safe, or emotionally affirming. But familiarity is not the same as faith. Safety is not the same as obedience. And affirmation is not the same as alignment. God will never force you to leave a distraction. He will simply keep reminding you of what you're called to build. The tension you feel is not confusion, it is contrast. Your spirit recognizes misalignment even when your emotions resist change. Covenant relationships grow with you. Distractions require you to stay the same. This is why discernment becomes sharper as destiny approaches. God begins to separate not because He wants you alone, but because He wants you aligned. Separation is not abandonment, it is preparation. And here's the quiet truth: when you release distractions, covenant connections either rise into alignment or naturally fade. You don't have to push, you don't have to confront aggressively. Alignment does the sorting. Chosen ones, not every goodbye is loss. Some goodbyes are obedience in motion. The most dangerous opposition in a chosen one's life rarely announces itself as hostility. It does not arrive with confrontation, threats, or obvious resistance. More often, it arrives wrapped in familiarity. It looks like comfort. It sounds like concern. It feels like support. And that is precisely why it is effective. What is familiar lowers your guard. What is familiar feels safe, and what feels safe is rarely questioned. Chosen ones must understand this truth clearly. Opposition does not always come to stop you. Sometimes it comes to stand beside you. It watches how you move, how you decide, how you respond. It learns your rhythms, your vulnerabilities, your patterns, and through repeated proximity, it gains influence. F. Familiarity creates access. Access creates influence. Influence shapes direction. This is not about paranoia, it is about awareness. God is not asking you to fear people close to you, He is asking you not to be unconscious around them. When God highlights familiar opposition, it is because the influence has gone unnoticed, not because the person is necessarily malicious, but because the impact is misaligned. One of the clearest signs of disguised opposition is subtle discouragement. Not direct discouragement, but comments that sound reasonable. Maybe now isn't the right time. You don't need to rush. Are you sure that's what God said? These statements don't deny your calling, they dilute urgency. And urgency matters when destiny is in motion. Chosen ones often ignore these moments because the words are wrapped in care. They come from someone who knows you, who has history with you, who has been present through seasons. But history does not equal authority. Familiarity does not grant permission to shape your future. Another form of disguised opposition is overfamiliarity with your past. People who knew you before transformation sometimes struggle to relate to who you are becoming. Instead of growing with you, they unconsciously pull you backward by constantly referencing who you used to be. They remind you of old mistakes, old limits, old identities, not to hurt you, but because your growth unsettles their understanding of you. God is concerned when familiarity anchors you to a version of yourself He has already moved you beyond. Disguised opposition also appears as excessive advice. Everyone has opinions, but not everyone has assignment. Advice that repeatedly accompany interdicts your inner clarity, minimizes your convictions, or reframes obedience as extremism is not neutral. It slowly erodes confidence in your discernment. Chosen ones must recognize that God speaks to them personally. While counsel is valuable, it is not meant to replace divine instruction. When someone's voice becomes louder than God's in your decision making, influence has crossed a line. Another subtle sign is emotional dependence. Some people become accustomed to your availability, your listening ear, your emotional support. When your focus begins to shift toward your calling, they resist, not with anger, but with neediness. They require reassurance, constant presence, and emotional labor that drains your capacity to move forward. This kind of opposition does not want you to fail. It simply does not want you to leave. And sometimes, not wanting you to leave is enough to slow destiny. God is deeply concerned with emotional entanglement because it creates invisible chains. You feel responsible for how someone feels. You hesitate to obey fully because you don't want to disrupt their comfort. And slowly, obedience becomes negotiable. Disguised opposition often avoids direct conflict. It prefers subtle tension, silence, withdrawal, passive resistance. When you step into alignment, the energy shifts. Conversations feel strained. Support feels conditional. Encouragement becomes inconsistent. Chosen ones sense this shift but often ignore it, hoping things will return to how they were. But they cannot. Growth changes dynamics. Destiny rearranges relationships. Another indicator is selective support. Disguised opposition may celebrate certain parts of your life while ignoring or minimizing your calling. They support what benefits them or feel safe, but disengage when obedience requires sacrifice or separation. God is concerned because partial support can be more confusing than outright opposition. You don't know where you stand, you second guess yourself, you wonder if you're overreacting. This internal confusion is often the first sign that influence is misaligned. Chosen ones must also understand that not all opposition is conscious. Some people genuinely care about you but are uncomfortable with the changes your calling demands. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your obedience exposes their compromise. Without intending harm, they resist the shift. This is why God emphasizes discernment over accusation. You are not called to label people as enemies. You are called to recognize impact. Disguised opposition thrives when you over explain. When you feel the need to justify your decisions repeatedly, you are negotiating with misalignment. Alignment does not require consensus. Obedience does not require approval. God is not asking you to cut people off aggressively. He is asking you to reorder access. Everyone does not get the same level of influence. Everyone does not get a front row seat to your decisions. When disguised opposition is present, your spirit often feels constrained. You feel the need to shrink, to soften conviction, to dilute passion to keep peace. This is not humility, it is suppression. True support expands you, even when it challenges you. Disguised opposition contains you, even when it complements you. Another powerful sign is resistance to boundaries. When you begin to guard your time, energy, and focus, disguised opposition reacts. It questions your availability. It frames boundaries as distance. It interprets growth as rejection. God is concerned when boundaries are constantly challenged because boundaries protect clarity. Without clarity, calling becomes blurred. Chosen ones are often too patient with disguised opposition because they value peace. But peace without alignment is not peace, it is avoidance. God does not call you to maintain false harmony at the cost of obedience. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey when God begins to reveal who can walk with them into the next season and who cannot. This revelation is rarely dramatic. It is gradual. It unfolds through patterns, reactions, and subtle shifts. Disguised opposition is exposed not by confrontation, but by consistency. As you remain obedient, the misalignment becomes obvious. Either the relationship adjusts or distance naturally forms. God is concerned not because you are in danger, but because you are advancing. The closer you get to purpose, the more precise your alignment must become. Familiarity that once comforted you may no longer fit you. This is not betrayal, this is evolution. Chosen ones must release the need to be understood by everyone. Destiny does not require universal comprehension, it requires obedience. When you recognize disguised opposition, do not panic, do not accuse, do not attack. Simply honor what God is showing you. Adjust your access, guard your influence, stay aligned. What is truly assigned to you will remain, what is not will fade without force. And in that process, clarity becomes protection. Words are powerful, but they are not the most reliable measure of truth. Chosen ones learn often through experience that what people say and what people leave behind after interacting with you are two very different things. God is not as focused on promises, compliments, or explanations as he is on impact. That is why energy, influence, and intent matter more than words. Words can be rehearsed, energy cannot. A person can speak encouragement and still drain you. They can claim support and yet introduce confusion. They can say all the right things while quietly pulling you off center. This is why God trains chosen ones to pay attention, not to conversation, but to consequence. Energy is the emotional and spiritual residue left after interaction. Influence is how someone shapes your thinking over time. Intent is the underlying motivation driving their behavior. When these three are misaligned, words become irrelevant. Chosen ones often get trapped by language. They listen carefully to explanations, apologies, and assurances, hoping clarity will come through conversation. But discernment does not argue with words, it observes patterns. If you repeatedly feel unsettled, distracted, or diminished after engaging with someone, that experience is data. God speaks through patterns more often than through events. One of the clearest signs that energy is misaligned is how you feel after connection, not during, but after. During the conversation, everything may feel fine. The tone is pleasant, the interaction seems harmless. But afterward, there is heaviness, a loss of focus, a subtle emotional fatigue. This is not imagination, it is information. Energy that aligns with your calling strengthens you, even if it challenges you. Energy that is misaligned weakens you, even if it flatters you. Influence works slowly. It rarely demands immediate change. Instead, it introduces small shifts in thinking. A little doubt here, a softened conviction there. Over time, these small shifts reshape direction. That is why God is concerned about influence more than intention. Someone may not intend harm but still influence you away from obedience. Chosen ones must stop excusing impact because of good intentions. Intent explains behavior, it does not cancel effect. Another key indicator is how someone responds to your growth. Words may say, I'm happy for you, but energy may say otherwise. There may be withdrawal, sarcasm, silence, or subtle comparison. Growth exposes intent. Alignment celebrates expansion. Misalignment tolerates it at best. God is deeply concerned with who has the power to shape your inner dialogue. Influence becomes dangerous when it starts sounding like your own thoughts, when you begin questioning your clarity, minimizing your convictions, or doubting what God has already confirmed. Influence has crossed from external to internal. This is why chosen ones must guard their ears as much as their actions. Intent reveals itself through consistency, not through one moment of kindness or one act of support, but through repeated behavior over time. Does this person consistently point you toward clarity, or do they consistently complicate decisions? Do they encourage responsibility, or do they enable avoidance? Do they respect your boundaries, or do they test them? Words often promise what behavior does not deliver. Energy is also revealed in reactions. Pay attention to how someone responds when you say no, when you set limits, when you choose obedience over convenience. Words may remain polite, but energy shifts, tension appears, distance grows, resistance surfaces. These reactions are not accidents, they are indicators. God is not asking you to judge these reactions, He is asking you to interpret them. Chosen ones often ignore energy because it feels intangible. They trust what can be explained rather than what is sensed. But spiritual maturity requires trusting what God reveals internally, even when it cannot be articulated externally. Influence that aligns with God brings peace, even when it stretches you. Influence that is misaligned brings unrest, even when it entertains you. Another important sign is emotional aftertaste. Some interactions leave you inspired, others leave you questioning yourself. Some increase gratitude, others increase frustration. These emotional patterns are not random. They reveal whether the exchange is nourishing or depleting. God is concerned when chosen ones remain in environments that require constant emotional recovery. If you need to recalibrate, pray intensely, or regain focus after every interaction with someone, that connection is costing you more than you realize. Intent also shows up in how someone handles your vulnerability. Do they honor it or do they use it? Do they protect your confidence or do they casually reference it later? Words may say, "You can trust me," but intent reveals itself in discretion. Chosen ones carry sensitive vision. Not everyone can be trusted with access to that vision. Sharing prematurely or with the wrong influence can dilute momentum. Another subtle but powerful indicator is whether someone consistently centers themselves in your experiences. Conversations always return to their feelings, their needs, their perspective. Your calling becomes secondary to maintaining their comfort. This is influence seeking dominance, not partnership. God is concerned because chosen ones are often generous with emotional labor. They listen deeply, support faithfully, and show up consistently. Without discernment, this generosity can be exploited, not always intentionally, but effectively. Energy that aligns with purpose respects reciprocity. It gives and receives, it does not consume endlessly. Influence also reveals itself in timing. Aligned influence encourages action when God is moving. Misaligned influence encourages delay. It frames waiting as wisdom even when God is saying move. It spiritualizes hesitation. Chosen ones must learn that delay can be disobedience when instruction is clear. Intent becomes clear when alignment costs something. When your obedience requires change, sacrifice, or separation, who supports you then? Who remains steady? Who withdraws? Words fade in these moments. Reality speaks. God is not against relationships. He is against anything that slowly replaces his voice. Energy, influence, and intent are the channels through which replacement happens. Chosen ones must stop overvaluing explanation and start honoring perception. You do not need someone to admit misalignment for it to be real. You do not need conflict to justify distance. You need alignment. When you begin to prioritize energy over words, something shifts. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop rationalizing discomfort. You stop negotiating clarity. God is not trying to make you cold. He is trying to make you clear. Words may sound right. Energy tells the truth. God has always been more committed to your purpose than to your comfort. This truth becomes unmistakable in the life of a chosen one, especially when protection feels inconvenient. Many people assume divine protection looks like ease, affirmation, and smooth paths. In reality, God's protection often looks like interruption, exposure, and discomfort because purpose is fragile in its early stages and comfort can quietly become its greatest threat. Comfort makes you settle. Purpose demands movement. God understands something we often resist. Comfort dulls discernment. When everything feels good, there is less urgency to question alignment. When relationships feel familiar and soothing, there is less motivation to examine impact. Comfort whispers, "Stay here, this is fine." Purpose whispers, "There is more." God protects purpose first because purpose carries consequences beyond you. Your calling affects others. Your obedience shifts environments. Your alignment opens doors that will not only bless you, but also require stewardship. That is why God intervenes early, before comfort turns into compromise. Chosen ones often misinterpret discomfort as a sign that something is wrong. But discomfort is frequently a signal that something is changing. God disturbs comfort to awaken clarity. He removes ease to sharpen focus. He allows tension to expose what has been tolerated too long. When God highlights a person, a habit, or a pattern that disrupts your peace, it is not punishment, it is prevention. Comfort protects feelings, purpose protects direction. God is concerned when comfort begins to override conviction, when you start silencing inner warnings to maintain harmony, when you stay quiet to avoid tension, when you delay obedience to avoid upsetting someone. These are subtle compromises, but they accumulate. Over time, purpose becomes negotiable. God will not allow purpose to be negotiated indefinitely. This is why divine protection sometimes feels like loss. God may remove a connection that felt stabilizing because it was anchoring you to a level you were meant to outgrow. He may disrupt routines that felt safe because they were keeping you predictable. He may allow relational distance because proximity was creating dependence rather than growth. Chosen ones must understand God is not trying to make you uncomfortable for no reason. He is trying to keep you undistracted. Comfort often disguises itself as peace, but peace rooted in avoidance is not peace, it is delay. True peace remains even when decisions are difficult. False peace disappears the moment obedience costs something. God protects purpose by exposing emotional attachments that compete with obedience. You may not realize how much influence someone has until God begins asking you to choose. Choose clarity over approval. Choose obedience over familiarity. Choose alignment over comfort. And suddenly the weight becomes visible. God is deeply aware of how emotional comfort can replace spiritual dependence. When people become your source of reassurance, validation, or direction, God's voice becomes secondary. Not because he stops speaking, but because his voice requires stillness, and comfort prefers noise. Protection often looks like separation before corruption. God does not wait until damage is done. He warns while adjustment is still possible. He disrupts comfort while clarity can still be restored. He brings unease not to confuse you, but to awaken you. Chosen ones frequently ask, why does obedience feel lonely? Because comfort thrives in crowds, but purpose often requires precision. Precision demands fewer voices, fewer opinions, fewer attachments. God is not isolating you, he is refining your access. When God protects purpose, he is also protecting timing. Delayed obedience can lead to missed moments. Comfort encourages postponement. Purpose requires responsiveness. That is why God will disturb environments that slow your response time. If you are too comfortable to move, you are too comfortable to obey. Another way God protects purpose is by revealing who is uneasy with your growth. Comfort wants everyone to stay the same. Purpose disrupts dynamics. When you begin to elevate, some people feel displaced, not because you rejected them, but because your movement challenges their stagnation. God is concerned when chosen ones shrink to maintain relational comfort. Shrinking is not humility, it is fear disguised as peacekeeping. Purpose requires expansion, expansion requires space. God will protect your purpose by confronting people pleasing tendencies. When your decisions are shaped by how others might react, your calling becomes conditional. God does not give conditional callings, he gives assignments that require courage. Comfort avoids conflict. Purpose embraces clarity. There are moments when God will make you uncomfortable enough that staying feels harder than moving. This is not cruelty, it is mercy. Because staying too long in misalignment costs more than leaving ever will. Chosen ones must reframe discomfort. It is not always a sign to retreat. Sometimes it is a signal to advance. God also protects purpose by limiting emotional access. You may notice that certain conversations no longer satisfy, certain connections no longer resonate, certain environments feel heavy. This is not confusion. This is discernment maturing. Your spirit is rejecting what no longer aligns. Comfort asks, why can't things stay the same? Purpose asks, why would they? God is not sentimental about seasons. He honors them, but he does not preserve them beyond their usefulness. People often want God to protect what feels good. God protects what produces fruit. Chosen ones often grieve the loss of comfort without realizing they are stepping into capacity to lead, capacity to discern, capacity to carry responsibility. Comfort limits capacity, purpose expands it. God will never sacrifice purpose to spare feelings. He cares about your heart, but He also cares about your assignment. And sometimes caring for the assignment requires confronting the heart. Protection also looks like silence. God may stop explaining Himself. He may withdraw emotional reassurance so that you learn to trust what He has already revealed. Comfort demands constant confirmation. Purpose requires confidence. God is training you to move without needing approval. When God protects purpose, He is also protecting future relationships. Misaligned comfort now can sabotage covenant later. Emotional entanglement in one season can create confusion in the next. God sees beyond the moment. He protects the future you cannot yet see. Chosen ones often want God to make it easier. God wants to make it clearer. Clarity outlasts comfort. The moment you accept that God values purpose above comfort, something shifts. You stop resisting correction. You stop negotiating obedience. You stop interpreting discomfort as rejection. You begin to trust that God's interruptions are intentional. What feels uncomfortable now may be the very thing preserving what is sacred. God is not taking peace from you. He is removing false peace so that true peace can emerge, and true peace is not found in staying where you are comfortable. It is found in standing where you are called.